Walk through any township in South Africa today, and you will feel the friction immediately. Residents are clashing over who has the right to live, work, and trade in these highly localized spaces. With unemployment hovering at crisis levels, the neighborhood spaza shop, often operating out of a reinforced shipping container, is a high-stakes survival tool. In these unregulated markets, even minor shifts in competition trigger immediate panic. But if you listen to well-funded NGOs or the South African Human Rights Commission, these localized uprisings are frequently dismissed with a single, highly charged label: xenophobia. The official stance frames these protests as unprovoked acts of bigotry. This creates a massive institutional blind spot. The organizations mandated to protect human rights are actively invalidating the day-to-day survival fears of the country's most marginalized citizens. 30 years ago, the post-apartheid government promised a different reality. The national contract was built on the idea of safety, shared prosperity, and collective healing. Instead, decades of entrenched corruption and unmanaged borders hollowed out that vision. The state stopped maintaining the boundaries and economic safeguards required to keep a developing nation stable. Without those guardrails, the poorest townships were left to absorb the impact alone. Already starved for resources, these neighborhoods became hyper-competitive environments, where locals and undocumented migrants are forced to fight over the exact same scraps. This struggle for resources is clearest in public healthcare. As clinics and hospitals buckle under the sheer volume of patients, a fierce debate has emerged over who is actually using the infrastructure. This public statement details a briefing where the Human Rights Commission stated there's no evidence foreign nationals are causing overcrowding in hospitals. Yet, directly beneath that claim, official data tells a different story. A 2023 Health Ombud report outlines the strain on maternal wards. At facilities like Rahima Moosa Mother and Child Hospital, foreign nationals account for more than 40% of patient admissions. The physical infrastructure simply wasn't built to handle that scale of demand. When a national institution publicly denies easily verifiable data, it effectively gaslights the public. Citizens are being told their daily experience with life-threatening resource scarcity isn't happening. That same denial extends to street-level safety. In places like Cape Town, a stark class divide has emerged in how crime operates. High-level transnational syndicates dominate the lucrative drug markets servicing wealthy suburbs. These are well-funded, organized networks. Meanwhile, township youth, cut off from legal opportunities, are recruited as foot soldiers. They are pushed into violent gang warfare just to survive. This graphic shows a controversial policing statistic from Gauteng in 2017, reporting that 60% of violent crime suspects arrested were undocumented immigrants. Police sometimes rely on mass undocumented sweeps to mask low conviction rates, but the number remains a focal point for public anger. Stripping away the bureaucratic noise doesn't erase the damage. For the poorest citizens, the daily reality of human trafficking and localized syndicate crime remains devastating. Frustration with this system has sparked organized civic pushback. Groups like Operation Dudula have mobilized, taking direct action against what they view as a biased institutional framework. Their formal memorandum to the Human Rights Commission accuses the body of failing its constitutional duty. The document states the Commission defends undocumented immigrants in unlawful business while ignoring marginalized locals. In response, you see scenes like this: officials seated in hearing rooms, processing explosive community anger through distant legal definitions. Continuing to brand these civic movements purely as hate groups misses the point. It ignores a desperate, legitimate cry for basic law, order, and state accountability. These statistics on hospital beds and crime suspects highlight a fracture in the national psyche. After decades of waiting for the basic promises of safety and dignity, communities are reacting from a place of deep, unresolved exhaustion. Applying a rigid, westernized human rights framework, one that prioritizes the undocumented over a deeply wounded local populace, is a structural failure. Instead of solving abuses, this disconnected approach drives people further apart. It breeds resentment and locks entire communities into cycles of poverty. A sustainable system for protecting human rights cannot exist in a vacuum. It relies on a government that is capable of securing its own borders and managing its national infrastructure. That means eradicating the bribery and police corruption that makes illegal immigration possible, a system that currently exploits vulnerable migrants and abandons citizens. To ever truly protect the vulnerable and uphold human dignity, South Africa must first listen to, prioritize, and heal its own people. Information moves across borders instantly. A localized spark of civil unrest in one city can travel across the African continent in a matter of seconds, igniting secondary fires thousands of miles away. These digital brush fires often start from genuine, localized friction. In South Africa, there is a very real, complex strain regarding resource scarcity, a crisis of unemployment, and contested border control. Facts quickly become contested. This post claims there is no evidence foreign nationals cause hospital overcrowding, but scroll down to the community notes for conflicting data. A 2023 Health Ombud report states foreign nationals comprise over 40% of patient admissions, driving severe overcrowding. When high-level political heavyweights step into this type of informational chaos, their rhetoric often acts as an accelerant. This text quotes ANC Secretary General Fikile Mbalula openly acknowledging the illegal immigration crisis. He points out that the issue isn't limited to African nationals, explicitly mentioning the presence of white, undocumented people. The official validation of the crisis only intensifies public anxiety. Filtered through viral, conflicting claims, the conversation often detaches from the underlying reality. The focus moves away from the actual policy failures and toward a volatile public reaction that can easily lose sight of its original target. We can see this exact dynamic play out at OR Tambo International Airport. As digital narratives of hostility toward migrants gain traction online, the Ghanaian government announced it was stepping in to run emergency charter flights to pull its citizens out of South Africa. Online, this was framed as a decisive protective maneuver, a sovereign nation swooping in to execute a humanitarian rescue mission for its people. But the rescue mission stopped cold at the departure gates. When the group arrived for their flight, South African border authorities began processing their exit paperwork. This digital post exposes the resulting border compliance data. Out of the entire group waiting to be evacuated, the authorities found that exactly 10 people were legally residing in the country. By attempting a highly publicized mass departure, the Ghanaian government had inadvertently handed South African immigration a consolidated manifest comprised almost entirely of undocumented immigrants. In a matter of hours, a grand gesture of humanitarian rescue collapsed into a public display of logistical incompetence. Politicians sought to capitalize on a viral moment, and in doing so, they orchestrated a massive diplomatic misstep that flagged hundreds of their own citizens for immediate legal scrutiny. The consequences of this digital velocity aren't strictly diplomatic. Look at this crowd. As viral videos of unrest crossed borders, the physical protests shifted to Nigeria, where crowds demanded immediate economic retaliation. Their primary target for retaliation was ShopRite. For years, the grocery chain was viewed across the continent as the ultimate anchor of the South African corporate empire, making it an obvious target for protesters looking to inflict financial pain. This flowchart maps who owns those local stores. The South African parent completely severed ties, transferring ownership to a Nigerian entity, Persianus Investment. Watch the metric fell, a 100% transfer. Every operation, profit margin, and liability belongs entirely to local Nigerian owners. The resulting destruction fell entirely on Nigerian assets. Protesters ended up burning locally owned property, paralyzing domestic supply chains, and eliminating thousands of Nigerian retail jobs. Citizens acted on an outdated brand association, amplified by internet panic. In their rush to punish a foreign entity, they burned down their own local economy. This is the true toll of the digital domino effect. Massive amounts of physical energy, public resources, and emotional bandwidth are spent attacking the wrong targets. And while crowds are busy fighting these phantoms, the actual structural failures, the overwhelmed municipal hospitals and mismanaged migration policies, are ignored completely. Social media feeds are engineered to exploit your immediate emotional reaction. They reward speed and volume, bypassing the slow, tedious work of verifying basic facts. Breaking this cycle requires a deliberate pause. In an era of instant global communication, protecting local stability means ensuring our first digital reaction does not dictate our final physical action. True accountability demands evidence. before we rush to sever diplomatic ties or dismantle local economies, we have to make sure we aren't just breaking ourselves.
Conclusion.
Welcome to this explainer. We're jumping right in today to take a sharp, data-driven look at the incredibly complex and honestly highly debated landscape of South African immigration policy. Today, we aren't dealing in opinions. Instead, we're strictly looking at official statements and holding them up against institutional data, public records, and actual events on the ground. It's a fascinating comparison, and mapping out these contradictions really is the best way to understand the current political climate. Now, this brings us to a massive core question. Who is actually accountable for South Africa's immigration policy? We absolutely have to ask this when the official narratives are completely clashing with institutional data. And the stakes here? They're incredibly high. Just to put that into perspective, consider recent police statements noting that 60% of violent crime suspects in Gauteng are illegal immigrants. So when political rhetoric doesn't match the action and the actual border logistics fall apart, who is responsible? It's one thing to have a policy on paper, but it's an entirely different beast to execute it transparently. To answer this, we'll quickly break down the current discourse. We are going to look at the immigration policy debate, then hospitals, political rhetoric, the OR Tambo incident, and finally, the path forward.
Section 1. Hospitals. Claims versus data.
Let's start right here. During a recent virtual Imbizo, the South African Human Rights Commission, the SAHRC, publicly and definitively stated that there is zero evidence that South African hospitals are overcrowded due to foreign nationals. Now, when a major institutional body makes a bold claim like that, it pretty much sets the baseline for the public narrative. But, as we so often see when we dig into the numbers, the story doesn't quite end there. 40%. However official that previous claim might have sounded, it's directly contradicted by verifiable institutional data. Specifically, community context added to that very same report points us right to a 2023 Health Ombud report. And that Ombud report explicitly states that foreign nationals comprise over 40% of patient admissions at the Rahima Moosa Mother and Child Hospital. This brilliantly illustrates the exact problem we're dissecting today. On one hand, you have the SHRC claiming there's no evidence of overcrowding due to migrants. Yet literally at the same time, you have the Health Ombud specifically identifying this demographic as the leading cause of overcrowding in Gauteng hospitals. So how are we, the public, supposed to navigate an immigration debate when two authoritative bodies are presenting completely opposing realities? It creates this massive accountability vacuum. Section 2. Political Rhetoric and Accountability. Consider the recent social media discourse surrounding ANC's Secretary General Fikile Mbalula. He recently came out and stated that illegal immigration in South Africa isn't just limited to African nationals. He explicitly broadened the conversation, mentioning that there are also white undocumented people living in the country. Now, as a political observation, sure, it highlights the diverse nature of immigration issues. But the public's reaction to the statement was immediate, and it wasn't really about the demographics at all. It was entirely about the governance. This simple question completely captures the sentiment of the citizens. Since Fikile Mbalula knew about illegal immigration, including white undocumented people, what exactly did he do about it? This single statement triggered an immediate, intense public demand for political accountability. People are astutely questioning why, if leadership already knew about these diverse, undocumented demographics, actionable steps weren't taken to actually enforce the law. The crucial takeaway here is this shifting public expectation. Citizens are looking well past political observations or deflections now. They are demanding measurable policy enforcement. Just identifying a problem at a press conference, that's no longer cutting it. The electorate is actively asking for proof of governance and accountability. Section 3. The OR Tambo incident. Here we see the real-time social media fallout from a major logistical breakdown. A planned departure, which was essentially a repatriation flight of a group of Ghanaians, was abruptly halted at the airport. This whole event played out in real time across news outlets and social media, prompting some very serious public allegations of both incompetence and criminality regarding how immigration departures are being handled. Let's unpack these allegations because, frankly, they're staggering. Reports claim that out of the entire group slated for departure, only 10 individuals on that flight list were actually legally in South Africa. Think about that for a second. The core accusation is that a false manifest was deliberately submitted to essentially shield illegal immigrants from departure. Naturally, this led to a massive public outcry, with citizens accusing politicians and diplomatic partners of actively encouraging illegal immigration. And as one user pretty bluntly put it, Ghana is putting their incompetence on full display for the entire world to see. This specific logistical failure has just added fuel to a fire of intense public frustration. It perfectly illustrates the massive diplomatic hurdles, the operational chaos, and the severe lack of transparency involved in executing everyday immigration policy. Because honestly, when a simple departure flight breaks down into allegations of falsified international manifests, public trust in border control just evaporates completely. Section 4. The path forward. So, when we synthesize these three case studies side by side, an undeniable pattern really emerges. Across healthcare, political leadership, and border logistics, there's just a gaping disconnect between what officials state publicly and what the logistical reality shows on the ground. We have the SEHRC directly contradicting the health ombudsman, we've got politicians stating facts without enforcing the policy, and we have planned deportations completely failing due to allegedly falsified international documents. I want to leave you with a final critical thought to chew on. How can a nation effectively govern when its own institutions, politicians, and diplomatic partners are operating on entirely conflicting sets of facts? More importantly, how can South Africa ever successfully enforce a functional immigration policy when the foundational truth of the situation is constantly in dispute? It's a massive crisis of accountability, and one that citizens are absolutely right to demand answers for. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep asking those hard questions, and I'll catch you next time.